So we just moved to a new house, and one of the things I'm most excited about is building a completely new gaming setup. This empty room is where the journey begins, and I have some wild, ambitious ideas brewing for how I can transform this space. And yes, there will be RGB. Now the first project I'm going to be tackling is coming up with the most epic DIY RGB desk mod that anyone has ever done on YouTube. I did a ton of research, and if you're wanting anything 80 inches or above for a sit-stand desk, your options become very limited. I ended up going with an 83 by 30 inch desk from a company called Vivo. They were one of the few companies that checked every box I was looking for, which was an all-white option for both the table and frame. I wanted a thicker 1-inch top compared to the standard 0.6, and if anyone else wants to try doing what I'm about to do themselves, I didn't want this to be outrageously priced. Getting this assembled was pretty straightforward and took me about 30 minutes from start to finish. Now, one of the things that's an absolute must in any great setup is cable management. And by the end of this video, you'll probably think I have OCD, but in reality, I actually just love the process of making everything look as clean as possible. For starters, this means every black cable that might be visible gets wrapped in some white mesh sleeves. Next, I'll be using some cable clamps with sticky backing to route the wires through and secure it in place. And I will leave links to everything I'm using in this video in the description, so make sure to head over there if anything catches your eye. Another nice thing about most of these sit-stand desks is that the frame naturally creates a spot where you can hide the wires behind. And you just want to make sure that nothing's hanging loose and that everything is secured to the underside. My first crazy idea took me to the hardware store where I picked up a couple different trim molding pieces that I thought might work to bring my idea to life. Each one of these 8-foot long pieces were about $7 and I bought 4 of each. I brought them home and did a couple quick miter cuts to make sure that they're able to come together to create a nice 90-degree angle, which they were. But this is where things started to get tricky. I would recommend cutting a couple sacrificial pieces to act as a guide on both sides, and then it's just a matter of cutting one of the 8-foot long sections down to the perfect length so that the corner angles come together tight. If you cut it a hair too short, the angles won't line up and you'll have to start over unless you don't mind a gap. I ended up cutting, measuring, cutting a little bit more, and continuing the process until it was just the right length. And what I'm trying to create is an extension of the desk that has a slight overhang, and you'll see why I'm wanting to do that here shortly. For attaching these trim pieces to the desk, I'll be using some extremely sticky and strong double-sided tape. I've used this in many projects and it's incredible. But since I know there will be many people that question this as a method, let me do a quick demonstration. I'll take a leftover trim section and put some of the tape on the side just like I'll be doing in my project. I'll remove the red outer layer and stick it on an extra cabinet door I had laying around. I'll push down for about 5 seconds, after which I can easily lift up the door by just the trim piece connected by the tape. And when I went to actually try aggressively taking it off, it wasn't budging, so I just left it. Now when I'm adding the trim to the desk, I want to make sure everything is as flush as possible, so I'm going slowly and using my hand to feel to make sure everything is even with the top. I'll be going through the same tedious process around the entire perimeter, trying to get the miter cuts to line up as best as possible, and then using the same sticky tape to attach. This step alone probably took about 3 hours, which included another trip back to the hardware store for another piece since I ended up cutting one too short. For the next step, I'm going to attach the other 4 sections of PVC molding that I bought to what we just installed. And since this isn't going to be as visible, I'm not as worried about it being perfect, and I'll skip the miter cuts for this part. And again, you'll see here shortly what I'm trying to do. So my plan for this top section is to install 2 diffuser channels, one on top of the other, and I'll be using my favorite profiles from Uzada. This was also one of the most time-consuming aspects because just like the first part we attached to the desk, you want these to line up perfectly. A couple best practices for this is to always cut with the diffuser channel attached. I highly recommend using some painter's tape to reinforce the bond, and always cut with the profiles on the side with the milky white diffuser pointing out. Doing this, I was able to get really nice 90-degree angles. Now as far as my thought process, let's pretend this piece of wood is the desk. I could just attach the aluminum profile directly to that and call it a day, but A, I've already done that in a previous project, and B, I don't want to see the aluminum because I think it takes away a little bit from the overall clean aesthetics I'm going for. This is where the first PVC molding piece comes in. However, if I attach it just like it is, the diffuser channel is a little bit too far back and the overhang would block some of the light. I also knew from the beginning I wanted dual channels, and if I did it this way, I wouldn't have room for the second. This is where the other PVC piece comes into play. By attaching this, it solved both problems. It pushes the profiles out the perfect distance so just the white diffuser is exposed while hiding the aluminum, and it creates the perfect amount of space for me to add a second channel. I'll be getting these secured using the same double-sided sticky tape, and just like before, this took a lot of trips to the miter saw to take off small increments to ensure a snug fit at the corners. Any sort of gap is going to lead to light leak and it won't look as cool when finished, so really take your time on this step. For the bottom section, I tested things out with the profiles butted up close to each other and then again with a small gap, and I personally like the look with the small space in between. I like that I can clearly see there are two separate channels because when they were pushed together, they blended in and looked like it was one solid section. I'll zoom in close so you can get a better idea of how it's coming together. You don't see any aluminum and it almost looks like the desk was built this way. And on the corner, the 45-degree miter cuts came together near perfectly. Now I did think about coming up with something to fill in the gaps since the desk has rounded corners, but besides me not having the best tools to accomplish this, I thought it might actually come in handy to have a little space available in case down the road I need to run wires from something on top of the desk to underneath. One other thing I'll point out is that if anyone's skeptical about using the double-sided tape, I pulled out my brad nail gun, and this would be another way, at least for the top profile, that you could reinforce the setup to make it more permanent. Moving on to the legs, and I'll be attaching one channel to each side of both legs. And going back to this desk checking every box, you need to make sure that when the desk goes up, that the part you're attaching the diffusers to also goes up. For example, here's a different sit-stand option that wouldn't work because the diffusers would remain stationary at the bottom, and as the desk goes up, the wires would rip off. Next, I'll be removing all the milky white covers from the channels and rotating the desk so that what we're now looking at will be the back. I'm going to measure halfway and make a mark. This is where I'm planning to have my wires connected to the LED strip, so I need to cut some of the aluminum out to make room. I'm sure there's a better way, but I grabbed a pair of tin snippers and cut a gap out. Again, this is going to be the back, so I'm not super worried about this looking perfect. After getting it cut, I used some electrical tape to go over the sides so that my wires wouldn't get potentially sliced on any of the sharp edges. Now, I did want to quickly mention that I just started a Patreon account, and I want to thank all my supporters who contribute directly to the channel. Every little bit helps me get closer to my dream of being able to make videos full time, and your support means the world to me. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'm truly blown away by your generosity. So it's now time to move on to the LED strips, and I recently did a video where I go over how easy it is to create a long, continuous run with no power injection using some 24-volt cob LEDs. But the downside is you lose true individual control of the LEDs and instead are able to control them in groups, which means the animations are not as dynamic or smooth. I wanted to try something different and try something that I've never used before. I tested out and fell in love with some individually addressable 5-volt WS2812B cob lights. These have a whopping 160 LEDs per meter and offer the ability to control each and every single one of those lights. This means for a 5-meter strip there are 800 addressable lights. To give you a quick idea of how cool this is, I'll get this test strip set up in my wooden swirl project that I made a while back. I'll leave a link to that video in the description in case you wanted to check it out. But I made this in the first place because you really can't get a good idea of the animations when it's wound up in the spool. So I wanted a way to quick unroll things and test the lights out. I'll get it connected to the Glidopto plug-and-play WLED controller and fire up some effects for you to get a better feel for what this strip is capable of. The animations are simply more dynamic with this type of pixel density. And these certainly aren't going to be ideal for longer installs, but I'm going to try making it work for this desk project since I absolutely love the way they look. Next, it was time to get out the soldering equipment. I'm going to be attaching my own 20-gauge silicone wires to the beginning of all the strips I end up using, so I don't need to mess around with the JST connectors. And in this example, I am using different colored wires, which will definitely make it easier to get everything connected when it comes time, but to make it all blend in better, I did end up using only white wires. So we're still looking at the back part of the desk, and I'll start by taking my first LED strip and installing it in the top profile at the halfway point and start working my way clockwise. Next, I'll take a second strip, and again starting at the halfway point where I cut the section out, I'll begin going counterclockwise in that same top profile. I'll turn the desk around and keep going with my one side until I'm at the middle point of what's now the front. I'll cut the extra LEDs off and then start working on the other strip to also get to the middle point before cutting those down to size. Now since these opposite ends are very close to each other, I slid a tiny bit of extra wire behind one of the sides just to ensure that they wouldn't end up touching and shorting out the strips. Then I'll do the exact same thing for the bottom profile. A third strip will get installed at the center point going clockwise, and then a fourth strip going the opposite direction where they'll meet in the middle in the front just like our top channel. Onto the legs, and I'll first be taking off all the diffuser covers. I'm going to use the same lights and again be soldering my own 20-gauge white silicone wires to each strip and placing them in the diffuser channel with the wires all at the top. And if you're counting, all in all with the legs and the LED strips around the table, I ended up soldering 36 connection points, so definitely a good project to gain confidence in this area. Now it's time for one of my favorite parts, which is cable management. And as you can see, it's currently a mess, but that's all about to change. I'll get the desk flipped over so we can start to get a game plan in place. So I thought it might be helpful to quickly go over exactly what I use to create a perfect under-desk cable management setup. The first thing I always have handy are some 14-inch long zip ties. These have a ton of different use cases, and it's super easy to snip off any extra length for a clean look. For a couple smaller cables or one big one, these hooks with a sticky back can come in super handy for making sure everything is up tight against the underside with nothing visibly hanging down. A lot of times you're going to have multiple bigger cables running alongside each other, and this larger clamp is what I use to keep all of them in place. For small wires that you want very precise routing, this clear cable track works excellent in those situations. Now for anything that has some good weight to it that you want to stick to the underside of the table, this industrial strength Velcro is an absolute must. Both the sticky and Velcro side are crazy strong, and I've never had to worry about something falling off when using this product. And finally, I always keep some good old duct tape handy, since every once in a while I find myself using it for something. The first thing I did, which is going to make my life easier here shortly, was to mark all the voltage wires with a red marker and all the ground wires with black. Now I purposely left a little bit of a gap between the metal frame and the top of the diffuser because this is where I'm going to be using zip ties. I'm doing this because when I move the wires around, I don't want them getting potentially ripped off the pads, and the zip tie is going to help reinforce the connection points. Next, I'll do the exact same thing on the other side with the colored wires and then the zip tie. From here, I'm going to pull everything towards the back area of the desk and use another zip tie to get everything condensed down to one big group. Then I'll use one of the larger clips to route the wires down towards the table surface, and finally, clip off the extra part of the zip tie. The other side is the exact same idea, but since the power block for the lift motor is there, I routed the wires underneath that cord and then used a large clip a little further out to keep things in place. For the middle group of wires, I used another large clip to secure those down to the underside so that there's no slack going out towards the profiles. Moving on, since I'll eventually have some pretty expensive tech plugged in, I'll be using a heavy-duty power strip that offers great surge protection for all my electronics. And this is a great time to use our industrial strength Velcro to get this mounted to the table. Now for powering the LED strip around the perimeter of the table, I had an extra 5V 30A unit laying around that I'll be using. With most of these types of supplies, there's a switch inside right here to select between 110 and 220 volts. In the US, we use 110, so make sure to flip the switch to that side. And as far as mounting, I'll be using the same Velcro that I used for the strip, but I won't be securing it to the underside quite yet. I have a short power cable that I'll be using to run to the 5V 30A supply, but first I need to get to the bare wires. Since it's a little too large for my wire stripper, I'll gently cut around the outside layer. Make sure to not use too much pressure since you don't want to cut through the wires on the inside. I'll remove the outer sheath, and now I can strip back the 3 wires in the middle. Black is our live, green is ground, and white is neutral. And when we screw these into the terminal, the L is where the black wire will go, the N is for white, and the green ground goes right here. And I will say, if you do have any small kids that you could ever picture going under your desk and touching some of the electronics, this power supply is one I'd recommend putting some type of ventilated box around to keep them from potentially getting a shocking surprise. Once this is in place, I'll use another large clip to secure the cable down. Moving on to how I'll be controlling the lights around the desk, I'll use 2 of Glidopto's new plug-and-play WLED controllers that I've used in many other projects of mine. I'll use more of the Velcro to get these attached to the table at spots that I think make sense. Next, since this WLED controller from Glidopto allows you to use a barrel plug or bare wires for power, I'll be measuring and cutting some 18-gauge silicone wires down to size to run from the main supply to each of our units. And just for reference, these first 2 slots that are under the negative V are where I just installed my 2 black negative wires, and these last 2 openings below the plus V are where I just installed the 2 red positive lines. Then these can go directly into the WLED controller's corresponding black negative and red positive clamp terminals right here on the input side of each device. And of course, another clip to keep everything tight up against the desk. Now for the fun part of getting all the wires connected. So the reason I did what equated to 4 different sections of LED strips is because if I tried doing one continuous strand around the top and bottom, each section would be over 5 meters in length and over 900 individually addressable LEDs, which is a lot for one data output. Splitting it like I did for this build allows me to have what will end up being 466 LEDs per data channel, resulting in a higher FPS for the animations compared to if I tried running all 932 off a single output. And to give you a better visual representation of what I'm doing, right here is the back of the desk, and the strip I have on the top profile going this way is what I'm going to be plugging into the top data output on the controller, which is GPIO 16. The other LED strip I have in the top channel going this way will get plugged into the same controller, but this one will go to the second data output at the bottom, GPIO2. Then for the two LED strips on the bottom profile, I'll be doing the exact same thing, but this time the wires will get plugged into our other WLED controller. I'll get the remaining wires connected, and as you can see, I'm cutting things down to size, which is a good reminder that it's much easier to do this than trying to add length after the fact, so always use more knowing you can cut it down if needed. Moving on to the legs, and for this I'll be using one of my favorite USB-C powered plug-and-play controllers, the Maher WLED. I've also used this for many builds and I've had absolutely zero issues. I'm going to be connecting my own 18 gauge wires and then using some 5-slot WAGO connectors to split the power, data, and ground. Then I'll be taking a travel soap container and using a drill bit to make a couple holes at the bottom where I can then feed all the wires through. This is another one that I'll be using the Velcro for and getting it attached to the desk. From here it's very easy since I marked all the wires previously. All my red marked lines will get connected to the voltage WAGO. All my black marked lines will go into the white ground WAGO, and then all the wires that have no markings I know are my data, and those will go into the green data output. Now you could very well want to wire these so that you have control of each strip on its own, but I personally thought that this might get too chaotic when it comes to animations, so I'm simply splitting the data so that all 4 lines will do the exact same thing at the exact same time. Next, I'll be using this USB-C powered wall plug to connect it to the Maher WLED, and then I'll be shoving all the wires into the soap dish and closing the top. And even though I'm using 5-volt strips for this project, if you opted for 12-volt lights, this controller is able to use the same USB-C power supply to provide 12-volt power to those lights with the flip of a switch, making this extremely versatile. From here, I'll plug things in and tidy up the wires with another clip. I'll repeat this entire process for the other leg with another Maher WLED controller as well as another USB-C power supply. And finally, I'll run some small clips down what will be the back part of the left leg for our main cord for the power strip so that it's not just freely hanging down when we flip the desk over. So now let's quickly pause a moment to appreciate just how clean this came out. We had a lot going on with 4 controllers, 3 power supplies, 36 loose wires, some soap boxes, a power strip and more, but after all is said and done, there's not a single loose wire or cable out of place, and if this doesn't get you motivated to tackle your own setup, then I don't think anything will. It's now time to get the desk flipped right side up, and then I can go back and reattach all the diffuser covers. And when you're taking these off, it will help if you label and organize them so you know which way they go back on, since they were all cut perfectly to fit the original way you put them on. And for all the channels that are attached to the legs, I'll be adding an end cap at the bottom since I don't want any light leaking out. Now if you're curious on my WLED settings, for the top diffuser channel strips, I have the brightness limiter turned on and set at 5000 milliamps. Further down for GPIO 16, I have WS281X selected as our strip type and length set to 466. For our other data output, which is GPIO 2, I have the same thing, but make sure to check the reversed box so that the animations will flow from one strip to the next as if they were connected. For the LEDs in the bottom channel that's around the desk, I have the exact same setting set for our second GLEDOpto controller. And on the legs, I have the brightness limiter on both Maher WLED controllers set to 2500 milliamps. This one uses GPIO 2 as the data output, and the number of lights on each strip is 86. So we're very close to the big reveal, and I hope this video will serve as inspiration for any fellow RGB enthusiasts that, like me, enjoy taking an idea and turning it into reality. And if you like this project, make sure to subscribe, as this is the first video in my journey of creating what I'm hoping will be one of the best gaming room setups ever made. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I hope you enjoy the far too many final results.
You tell me you don't feel the same way I do. I've tried to understand how you don't see me in this light. Tell me, what do you see? 'Cause I've seen your eyes, they linger. you